There are some things a man can run away from. He can run away from poverty. He can run away from the village. He can run away from bad memories. He can even change his phone number. But there is one thing a man can never outrun. His past. And on this particular afternoon at Likoni Mall, Japesa was about to discover that his past had better memory than he did. Months earlier, Japesa had arrived in Mombasa as a very confident man. A man with a new job, a new salary, a new city, and, most importantly, a new title. Clearing supervisor. 180,000 shillings a month. To a man coming from the village, that was not a salary. That was a government budget. Japesa believed his life had changed forever. And technically, he was right. It had. The only problem was that Mombasa had its own plans for him. Because before Japesa became a respected supervisor, before he found a 4-bedroom house in Nyali, before he brought his wife and son from the village, before he learned how expensive a simple lunch could become, there was the small matter of surviving Mombasa itself. And that story began with one phone call. Back in the village, Japesa was living a simple life with his wife, King, and their son. Life was not perfect. Money came and disappeared with impressive speed. Bills had a habit of arriving before the money. And every time Japesa looked at his bank balance, it looked like the bank itself was apologizing. But Japesa was not a man without ambition. He had always believed that somewhere, somehow, his big opportunity was waiting for him. He just did not know that the opportunity was waiting several hundred kilometers away. In Mombasa. Then one morning, the phone rang. Japesa answered without much interest. It was the call that changed everything. He had been offered a job. Not just any job. A position as clearing supervisor at Zakaria Motors' main branch in Likoni. And the salary? 180,000 shillings. For a few seconds, Japesa forgot how to breathe. He repeated the amount in his mind. 180,000. King immediately knew something had happened. Her husband had the face of a man who had either received very good news or accidentally swallowed a chicken bone. When Japesa finally announced the news, the whole atmosphere in the house changed. Their son wanted to know whether the money was for the family. King wanted to know whether the job was permanent. Japesa wanted everybody to know that his time had finally come. The village, of course, also wanted to know. Because in the village, good news travels faster than electricity. By evening, the people were already congratulating Japesa. Some were genuinely happy for him. Some were impressed. And some had already started calculating what his new salary meant for them. That is the problem with becoming successful. Your success stops belonging entirely to you. Suddenly, everybody has a relationship with your money. One person needs school fees. Another needs a business loan. Another needs help with a medical bill. And there is always that one relative who has never called you for 5 years, but suddenly remembers your name perfectly. Japesa enjoyed the attention. He was finally becoming the man he had always imagined himself to be. A man with a serious job, a serious salary, and a serious future. But there was one person who was thinking about something completely different. King. She was proud of her husband. Very proud. But she also knew men. And she knew cities. And she knew that when a man moves to a big city with a big salary, sometimes the city gives him more than a job. It gives him options. That night, while Japesa slept peacefully, dreaming about his new life, King quietly prepared something. Something small. Something personal. Something she believed would keep her husband connected to home. She called it a little charm. Japesa would probably have called it superstition. But King did not care. She wanted him to remember that somewhere in the village, there was a wife waiting, and a son waiting, and a family that believed in him. She quietly placed the charm among his belongings. Then she looked at her sleeping husband. For a moment, she smiled. because she knew Japesa was going to Mombasa chasing money. But she hoped he would return with his heart still intact. The day finally came. Japesa packed his belongings. He said goodbye to the village. People came to see him off. Some wished him well. Some gave him advice. And some gave him advice they had no qualifications to give. Everybody had something to say about Mombasa. Some told him the coast was beautiful. Some told him the food was amazing. Others warned him about the heat. And there was always somebody who knew somebody who had gone to Mombasa and never returned the same person. Japesa listened to everything. Then he left. As the vehicle carried him away from the village, he looked through the window. The familiar landscape slowly disappeared. The houses became fewer. The roads changed. And with every kilometer, Japesa felt that he was leaving his old life behind. He was excited. He was nervous. But mostly, he was confident. Very confident. The kind of confidence only a man with a new job and a salary he had not yet received can have. Then he reached Mombasa. And reality introduced itself. The first major test was the Likoni ferry. Japesa had heard about it. But hearing about something and experiencing it are two very different things. The crowds. The vehicles. The people moving in every direction. The noise. The heat. The sea. Everything seemed to be happening at the same time. Japesa stood there trying to understand the system. He was a village man entering one of the busiest parts of Mombasa. And naturally, he did what every confident village man does when he doesn't understand what is happening. He pretended he understood. Japesa spoke his heavy Dolio with complete confidence. Unfortunately, the ferry did not speak Dolio. The people around him stared. Japesa tried again. Still nothing. He switched languages. Still confusion. Eventually, somebody explained where he needed to go. Japesa nodded as if he had understood everything from the beginning. He walked away proudly. And then his shoe came off. The first thing Mombasa took from Japesa was not his money. Not his peace. Not his dignity. His shoe. The shoe landed dangerously close to the water. Japesa rushed after it. A wave splashed him. People laughed. And that was Japesa's official welcome to Mombasa. He picked up his shoe, put it back on, and looked around. Nobody had to tell him what the laughter meant. Mombasa had already noticed him. A few kilometers from the ferry stood Zakaria Motors' main branch in Likoni. This was Japesa's new workplace. This was where his new life was supposed to begin. He arrived early. He dressed carefully. He checked his appearance. Straightened his shirt. Adjusted his shoes. And prepared himself for the first day of the rest of his life. He entered the company with the confidence of a man who had just been given a title. Clearing supervisor. Those two words sounded very important in Japesa's head. He imagined himself sitting in an office. People bringing him documents. He would look at them seriously. Sign a few papers. Make a few phone calls. And go home. Unfortunately, the job description had not been written inside Japesa's imagination. At Zakaria Motors, he quickly learned that being a supervisor did not mean avoiding work. It meant being responsible when everybody else's work went wrong. Clearing work was not a joke. Documents had to be accurate. Cargo had to move. Deadlines had to be respected. Clients had to be handled. And when something went wrong, everybody suddenly knew the supervisor's name. Japesa discovered this very quickly. His first days were a mixture of confidence, confusion, and survival. He learned new systems, new procedures, new people, new expectations, and new vocabulary. Words that sounded simple until somebody attached money to them. Because in clearing, a small mistake could become a very expensive mistake. Japesa began to understand why the company was willing to pay him 180,000 shillings. They were not paying him to sit comfortably. They were paying him to solve problems. And Mombasa had no shortage of problems. Then came another shock. The cost of living. Back in the village, Japesa had developed the habit of buying things without thinking too much. In Mombasa, every purchase became a negotiation between his stomach and his bank account. The first time he went for lunch and received the bill, he looked at it several times. He wondered whether the waiter had accidentally added somebody else's food. He had not. That was the price. Suddenly, 180,000 did not look as enormous as it had looked in the village. Mombasa was eating it. Rent was eating it. Transport was eating it. Food was eating it. And somehow, even the air in Mombasa seemed to come with a service charge. Japesa started learning quickly. He learned where to eat, where to shop, where to negotiate, where not to take a taxi unless absolutely necessary. And most importantly, he learned that having a big salary does not automatically make you rich. It simply gives you a bigger amount to watch disappear. Japesa initially needed somewhere to stay. He looked around. Some places were too small. Others were too expensive. Some apartments looked beautiful in photographs but became very different when seen in person. Eventually, Japesa found a 4-bedroom house in Nyali. And this time, he knew he had found something special. The house gave him a vision. For the first time, Mombasa stopped feeling like a temporary destination. It started feeling like home. Japesa imagined Aking walking through the house. He imagined his son playing in the compound. He imagined family dinners. He imagined waking up every morning knowing that the sacrifice had been worth it. He made the decision. He would bring his family to Mombasa. But first, he needed to settle down. He needed to prove that he could make it. When Japesa called Aking, she asked the usual questions. How was work? How was the city? Was he eating? Was he sleeping? And, most importantly, was he behaving? Japesa assured her that everything was fine. He told her about the job. He told her about the house. And when he told her it had 4 bedrooms, Aking could not believe it. The woman who had watched her husband leave the village with 1 suitcase was now hearing that he had found a 4-bedroom house in Nyali. For Aking, that was more than a house. It was proof. Proof that Japesa's dream was beginning to become real. The plan was simple. Japesa would settle down. Then Aking and their son would join him. And for a while, everything went according to plan. Eventually, the day came. Aking and their son arrived in Mombasa. Japesa was waiting for them. He watched as they approached the house. Their son entered first. The boy was amazed. The house seemed enormous compared to what they were used to back home. He ran from room to room. And for Japesa, that moment was priceless. He had left the village alone. Now his family was standing in the house he had worked for. He had done it. He had brought his family to the city. He had built something. For the first time, Japesa felt settled. Mombasa was no longer the place where he worked. It was now the place where his family lived. The family slowly adapted. Their son became fascinated by the ocean. Aking began learning the neighborhood. Japesa became familiar with the roads, the ferry, the shops, the traffic, the food, the people. He even began picking up coastal expressions. Sometimes he would return home speaking differently. Aking would look at him and wonder whether the Mombasa air was changing him. Japesa was changing. His clothes became sharper. His confidence grew. His English became more polished. His work vocabulary expanded. He began walking like a man who knew exactly where he was going. And maybe he did. But there was one thing Japesa had not learned. How to balance success with family. The months passed. The job became more demanding. The salary was good. But the responsibility was becoming heavier. There were shipments, documents, clients, deadlines, calls, unexpected problems. Some days Japesa came home exhausted. Other days he arrived late. And every time he walked through the door late, the king noticed. She did not always complain. Sometimes she simply watched him. She knew that Japesa was working hard. She knew he wanted to succeed. But she also knew that a man can become so busy building a future that he forgets to live in the present. Japesa tried to reassure her. He told her he was doing everything for the family. And he meant it. But the more successful he became, the more demands appeared. The job wanted more. The city wanted more. The family needed more. And somewhere in the middle, Japesa was getting tired. Months passed. The village Japesa had left behind started feeling distant. He still called home. Still remembered people. Still visited when he could. But something had changed. Mombasa was becoming part of him. He knew the roads. He knew the ferry. He knew how to avoid unnecessary expenses. He knew how to negotiate. He knew where to get what he needed. He had become a Mombasa man. Or at least, he thought he had. Because the city had taught him many things. But it had not taught him how to deal with the past. That lesson was coming. And it was coming very soon. Several months after moving to Mombasa, Japesa found himself at Likoni Mall. It was an ordinary day. Nothing appeared unusual. He had no idea that his life was about to change. He walked through the mall carrying a few shopping bags. He looked relaxed. He was no longer the nervous village man who had arrived months earlier. He had settled. He had confidence. He had a family. He had a career. He had built a new identity. Then he noticed a woman looking at him. At first, Japesa ignored her. He assumed she was simply looking in his direction. But the woman did not stop. She continued staring. Japesa looked again. Their eyes met. The woman started walking toward him. Something about her face felt familiar. But Japesa could not place it. Then she called his name. Not his nickname. Not the name everybody knew. His full name. James Obiero Japesa. And suddenly, the confidence disappeared. Because there are names that belong to the present. And there are names that belong to the past. Hearing his full name from this woman took Japesa straight back to a life he had tried very hard to leave behind. Her name was Vivian Konyala. And Japesa knew her. He just wished he didn't. Konyala stood there looking at him. Japesa was stunned. The woman he had not seen in years was standing in front of him in Mombasa. Not in the village. Not somewhere far away. Mombasa. His new home. The city where he had believed he could start fresh. Konyala looked at him carefully. She noticed the clothes. The confidence. The expensive phone. The new version of Japesa. And she smiled. Because she remembered the old one. The Japesa before the salary. Before Niali. Before the title. Before the family life in Mombasa. Before all of this. And suddenly Japesa realized something terrifying. He had spent months building a new life. But he had never completely buried the old one. Konyala had remembered everything. Just as the conversation became uncomfortable, Japesa's phone rang. It was Aking. His wife. The woman he had promised his life to. The woman waiting for him at home. Japesa looked at the phone. Then at Konyala. Then back at the phone. For a few seconds, he did not know which problem was more dangerous. Answering the phone. Or not answering it. Eventually, he answered. He tried to sound normal. But Konyala could see the nervousness on his face. Aking asked where he was. Japesa told her he was at Likoni Mall. That was true. But sometimes, a true statement can still hide a lie. Because he did not tell her who he had met. He did not tell her about Konyala. And he certainly did not tell her that Konyala had walked back into his life carrying memories from a chapter he had never discussed with his wife. After the call ended, Japesa knew he had a problem. Konyala knew it too. And Konyala was not finished. There was a time before Aking. A time before Japesa became a husband. Before he became a father. Before Mombasa. Before Zakaria Motors. Before the 4-bedroom house in Nyali. There had been Konyala. They had known each other closely. They had shared moments. They had shared secrets. And something had happened between them. Something Japesa had chosen to leave behind. But leaving something behind does not mean it disappears. Sometimes it simply waits. Konyala had waited. And now she was standing in front of him. She told Japesa that she had not forgotten. She remembered his promises. She remembered his disappearance. She remembered how he had walked away. Japesa tried to explain. He said life had changed. But Konyala did not believe him. Because from her perspective, it was not life that changed. It was Japesa. Then Konyala did something unexpected. She reached into her bag. She took out an old photograph. Japesa immediately recognized it. The confidence he had built over months disappeared. His hands became still. His face changed. Because some photographs are harmless. Others are evidence. This one was evidence. Evidence of a past Japesa thought was gone forever. He wanted to know where Konyala had found it. But deep down, he already knew. The photograph represented something he had tried to forget. Something that could threaten the life he had built. Something that could raise questions Aking had never asked. And then Konyala told him the reason she had come to Mombasa. It was not simply to see him. It was not because she missed him. It was not because fate had brought them together. She had come because of something Japesa had left behind. Something connected to their past. Something that was now coming back to him. Japesa was confused. Then frightened. Because Konyala's next words changed everything. She had not come to destroy his marriage. She had not come to ask him for money. She had not come looking for romance. She had come because there was something Japesa needed to know. Something he should have known years ago. And whatever it was, Konyala was carrying the answer. That evening Japesa returned to his Nyali home. But he was no longer the same man who had left it. Aking noticed immediately. She looked at him. She asked if everything was okay. Japesa said yes. But his face said no. Aking knew her husband. She knew when he was tired. She knew when he was angry. And she knew when he was hiding something. Japesa tried to act normal. He ate. He talked. He moved around the house. But his mind was somewhere else. It was back at Likoni Mall. With Konyala. With the photograph. With the past. Later that night, when everybody had gone to sleep, Japesa sat alone. He remembered the charm Aking had secretly placed among his belongings before he left the village. He found it. He held it in his hands. And for the first time, the little charm did not make him laugh. It reminded him of something. Family. Home. Promises. And the man he had promised Aking he would remain. Japesa looked at the charm. Then he remembered Konyala. And he realized that the biggest threat to his new life might not be Mombasa. It might be the truth. The next morning, Japesa went to work. He tried to concentrate. He looked at documents. He answered calls. He dealt with clients. He supervised the clearing process. But his mind kept returning to Konyala. Then his phone vibrated. A message. Unknown number. It was Konyala. She wanted to meet again. Japesa stared at the message. He knew he should ignore it. He knew he should go home. He knew he should tell Aking. But there was another part of him. The part that wanted answers. The part that wanted to know what Konyala had been talking about. So Japesa agreed to meet her. And that decision was the beginning of a new problem. When Japesa met Konyala, again the mood was different. There was no surprise now. Only tension. Japesa wanted answers. Konyala wanted the truth. She reminded him of the past. She reminded him of the promises. She reminded him of the way he disappeared. Japesa tried to defend himself. He said he had moved on. He had a wife, a son, a job, a home, a life. Konyala listened. Then she asked one simple question. What about what you left behind? Japesa had no answer. Because somewhere deep inside, he knew there was something. Something he had never confronted. Something Konyala had carried all these years. Then she showed him the photograph again. This time, Japesa looked at it carefully. And the fear on his face told us more than any words could. Whatever was in that photograph, it mattered. A lot. Japesa asked Konyala why she had really come to Mombasa. Konyala looked at him. She took a deep breath. Then she gave him the answer he had been avoiding. She had not come to Mombasa because of him. She had come because of what he had left behind. Japesa stood there frozen. The man who had come to Mombasa believing he had finally escaped his old life was now standing face to face with it. His job was in Mombasa. His wife was in Mombasa. His son was in Mombasa. His beautiful house was in Mombasa. His future was in Mombasa. And now, his past was there too. Japesa had thought the biggest challenge of moving to Mombasa would be finding a good job. He was wrong. The real challenge was going to be protecting the life he had built from the secrets he had brought with him. Konyala looked at him. Japesa waited. Then she said there was something he needed to know. Something about the past. Something about what happened before he left. Something he had never been told. And as Japesa listened, his face changed. Because whatever Konyala was about to reveal could destroy everything. Japesa came to Mombasa looking for a better life. He found a big salary. He found a respected job. He found a beautiful home in Nyali. He brought his wife and son. He built a future. But every future has a foundation. And Japesa's foundation was built on a past he had never completely explained. Now that past had a name. Konyala. And she had not come to Mombasa by accident. The question was no longer, who is Konyala? The question was, what does Konyala know? And more importantly, what did Japesa leave behind? Because in Mombasa, everybody has a story. And sooner or later, the city makes you tell it. To be continued.